July 7th, 2017. Doug Littrell again. This is video number 30. I've been trying to work up my explanation for static electricity, for electric current, electricity, for conductors. All those have to harmonize and unite. Everything about it has to make sense and fit together. Now, I made a mistake yesterday. I want to clear up right here. Now, I thought of the correct, what I believe is the correct explanation at the end of the video, and put it in with the written part, or added it to the end of the written part. It was in there. Anyway, you see, when I was trying to figure out why these electric photons that circulate in and out of magnets all the time, they're there in the environment. You know, if you take and demagnetize a magnet, where do they go? Back into the environment. Surprise, surprise, surprise. Anyway, they're there in the environment. There's an Ather, I'm sorry. Anyway, this is part of it. There's a subatomic particle environment. I'm sorry, there is. You know, the Michelson-Morley experiment didn't decide that. There's several reasons why there's no way that could have determined whether there was an Ather or not. It's ridiculous not to have an Ather. Anyway, you know, you're trying to resort to magical explanations if you don't have an Ather. But anyway, I was trying to explain why these electric photons in the environment would supplant radio particles in a radio shell, in an unfilled radio shell, a shell that the nucleus doesn't have enough attraction for that type at that distance from the nucleus in order to make it filled. You know, it might be 10%, it might be 20%, 30%, 50%, 75% filled, 90% filled, whatever. There might be 2 or 3 of them out there, which would be like having nothing. But anyway, I was trying to figure out why. Not only do these electric photons need to come in and supplant some of those radio shells, say in a covalent shell that's maybe 15% filled, let's say, of what its capacity would be were it completely spherical. Okay, and instead of just orbiting in a nice neat line, they're moving, circulating through and around the material. And you know, if there was something that is introduced to that fluid shell that's attractive, then by that attraction it would spread that evenly over all the nuclei, and that's how I believe electric current is usually spread so quickly. But I was needing to explain how these electric photons, they're single photons, could supplant these radio particles in these shells. You know, I thought maybe they get hit by radiation particles and carry them a little bit out of line, and then a bunch, you know, whatever the complement of electric photons would supplant one, beat them to that spot, to it coming back to its spot. But I have to abandon that because of this reason. And I knew I was going to have to explain this. When you look at, like on the Wikipedia page for electrical resistivities of the elements, it's a data page. Whenever you look at the low temperature, the lowest temperature listed, which is 80 Kelvin, minus 193 Celsius, you know, at 20 degrees Celsius, that's usually the resistivity that we assign and rely on and think of in relation to that element. You know, in copper, it's, let's see, in copper, it is 1.678. Aluminum, it's These are real good conductors. 2.650. Now that's 20 degrees Celsius. Yeah. At minus 193 degrees Celsius, um, aluminum has a resistivity of 0.245. Beryllium at that, which has a higher resistivity, but it's not bad. Of course, beryllium I think is poisonous, so you wouldn't want to breathe it or swallow it. That's for sure. Anyway, but it's 3.56 at 20 degrees Celsius. At minus 193 at 80 Kelvin, it's 0.075. Electric current just passes right through these things in cold temperatures. Copper is 0.215. Now it's interesting that beryllium becomes more conductive at that low temperature than copper or aluminum, though it has a higher resistivity at 20 degrees Celsius. But the point is that, and all of these elements are listed here with respect to their resistivity levels. The point is that when it gets colder, these materials transmit electric current more easily. And so why is that? And the answer is, what I have to do, I have to abandon something. One of the reasons I had come up with for electric current to come into that covalent shell, if that's let's say 10 or 15% or 20% filled, that's the outer shell. It wouldn't be that temperature is held, and temperature would be those radiation strikes hitting those and making some of them cerium. Now they would be held normally. They wouldn't be lost because they're hit. It could be. They are lost by electric current being reversed at a high rate. And they're sent out and then they're restocked, and that's how you get radio waves. But so they can definitely be lost by those by strikes like that. But generally speaking, they're not going to be lost by those, and that's not the correct answer to explain why these electric photons come into a covalent shell like that that's circulating in and around and through, let's say, a copper wire or aluminum or whatever that's a good conductor. So it's the last explanation I came up with. When you have a plethora or a profusion of electric photons, and this is going to have to go, of course, advance into or cross over into how to explain electric current in DC batteries, not just from the power plant where you have the disturbance of the radio shells by the turning rotor, or when you take the PVC wand, and you rub it, and then you're disturbing radio shells on those molecules. But the reason that let me back up. The way I had to realize this explanation was, see, if it were the disturbance of radio particles by radiation strikes, you have to still need another reason for why it escalates into why those photons escalate. And the reason they would escalate is because once they have come in, now they have more repel than the radio shell they supplanted. And I've already explained that yesterday. And so that extra repel, that creates a disturbance, which lets more come in. So there's your explanation. And so so initially though, it's not going to be strikes, radiation strikes that give the opening for these electric photons to come in and take the place of some radio shells in that covalent shell. They're when you bring a material that's being loaded, say, from a generator next to, let's say, two wires, uh, and one of them is being loaded at the generator with a perfusion in that shell, in that covalent shell, say, and it's being transmitted atom to atom over atom to atom. And so when you touch that to another wire, they're going to jump into that because, so whenever you have, and these atoms are joined, so they're in close proximity. So that's why you have the covalence. But once you join, when you're introducing a perfusion like that, you're simply bringing something up against it or close to it, and they jump into it. And so when that happens, it's the repel of being in close proximity that causes the disturbance and lets them enter as well. And so I wanted to clear that up from yesterday because I didn't have that quite right yet. Because now in the reason that is because low temperature causes more conductivity, better conductivity, much better. And so when you have still radio shells, they're not being struck by radiation strikes or very little. They're almost standing still. And the radio shells are almost not even vibrating, that are the filled ones underneath, let's say. Okay, now that's going to make it more conducive to being disturbed than if they are moving, see? Because when you bring that profusion in close proximity of the cold substance, they're going to disturb even more easily if they're quiet than as if they're moving. And there's more confusion, there's more activity, then that's not helpful. So when you already have the repel, that's going to create the disturbance. In this profusion of electric photons, they're loaded in another, say, a covalent shell in this material that's brought next to this other one that's cold, very cold, and they're going to jump into it. Their presence, that repel creates the disturbance that allows them to jump into it. So, and of course, there's limits to how many it can hold. So there's, they gain entry, and then which lets more gain entry, but then there's going to be certain limits. So there's still limits, of course, but it's, electric current is an amazing thing. We use it all the time. Our brains work by it. Everything is how electric current is how our brains work. When there's no electric activity in the brain, you're dead. So, yeah, and it'd be wonderful if we could grasp in a more realistic way how all this works. So that's the point here. Okay, continuing on with the pit ball type experiments and how to interpret them. Got a little bit more to do in that respect today. I've got the camera tipped again. I'm trying to show this bead. Let's see. This bead down here in the corner. I want it as close to the camera as possible. Need to get it the right distance away. I made this, shim this so that I can get the wand up close to the bead. Let's see. Would like to get it about 1/4 of an inch away, maybe even a 1/16 of an inch away from it. I've changed the end of the wand to black instead of white because I want the bead to show up. You know, it's a bright aluminum bead. It doesn't show up against white. I can see it now. It looks like it's showing up. Okay, well, we'll see if it still is just as reactive with the the black magic marker material on it. Of course, I believe that I'm disturbing radio shells on the PVC by rubbing them like this. Yeah, same effect. Okay, what you have, oh, did you see that? It was attracted to the bottom and then it repelled. It didn't touch. It's still repelled right now. It's out in front on the side of the camera. There it is to the side. Let's see. Move this over. Okay. Maybe I can get the camera down a little farther. Okay, it's repelling. Whoop, now it's attracted. Look, it's following. Oh, now it's repelled. It's attracting. What I want you to notice is that it's attracted to the bottom side, and then suddenly it repels from the bottom side. And what I think is happening is there's a transmission of electric photons into the aluminum. Now, the more aluminum you have is what I've determined when I made some larger aluminum covered pith balls, that there was too much aluminum for this to occur with this size wand. At least, you know, that's what I would think. That's how I think you would interpret it. Anyway, this works even faster if you touch. Now, I think there's some transmission going on at a small distance like that. Not when there's repel, only when there's attraction. But when you touch it, okay, I think it's touching now. If what I did by disturbing the molecules in the this PVC, if that doesn't dissipate too fast here, you'll see that bead jump away again and repel, because it gets the electric photons have those that it takes to supplant a radio shell particle. They have more repel than the radio particle, because the radio particle has a center low charged photon that its mid positives are attached to, trying to neutralize with the environment. And so, but the electric photons are just individuals that would be most of those that are on the surfaces of those radio particles, and they don't have to, they're being singles and coming together, you know, coming as a coming because they're attracted to do this, as they are with magnets. That type comes in, and they have more repel per the number it takes to supplant one radio particle. There's always more repel in the electric photons it takes to supplant them. That's the way I would explain this. Now, the effect happened right at first when I did this. It looks like things have dissipated too much for it to happen again with that, after that much rubbing and that much time. So I'm going to do this again. Hopefully not rub off my black magic marker too much. And see, it's repelled right now. But that's because the bead has retained its loading. A lot of its loading it was getting just before that, when it was touching and it was near to it. There was a transmission into it, and so it was touching. Now you have to wait for that to dissipate so that some of the radio particles come back to their proper places. And let's see, yeah. And once enough of that happens, now there's no transmission when it's repelling. The repel is just, there are so many of those on both. Look, it's coming back. There are so many of those on the surfaces after you disturb those, the electric photons, and then those that have gone into the covalent shell that circulates through and in and outside all the atoms in the aluminum. So that creates it can create quite a distance in between two objects when one of those has such little mass, like the small aluminum bead has very little mass, so it's not competing with much gravity, and it responds to that repel at quite a distance. Now it's coming back over, or it's dissipating, so the bead is coming back. Now it's attracted. Look, it attached again, and oh boy, did it ever. And now it's repelling again. It loaded up again. I was just going to move it away, but that was, some might try to say, well, that was the side. But I've already done this before when you couldn't see the bead as well because I didn't have black magic marker on here, and it was attached. I mean, they were barely touching, just like this. In fact, I might include that at the end of this, a small clip of that at the end of this video, so you see it. You can't see the bead when it's on the white wand, but when it jumps away, you can see it. And it was resting. It was attached. It was attracted to the PVC wand, and then suddenly it got too much. There was too much repel, too many electric photons, both that were in the outer radio shells that had been disturbed on the PVC tube, as well as those that have fed into the covalent shell in the aluminum. And once enough were in the aluminum, in that shell, and since electric photons have more repel than the radio particles they supplanted, then suddenly there was so much that they repelled, and the bead jumped over to the side and stayed away. It's coming back again, but it may have dissipated too much for the effect to occur again. This shows that we don't need negative charge. Negative charge doesn't exist. If it were true that negative charge were instrumental in this, then you would have negatively charged electrons coming down to the bottom side of the the aluminum bead and then attaching to the positively charged wand. And then they should have stayed. They shouldn't. You maybe would have had another side that was more positively charged according to the standard model approach. And so you could have taken it and go around to the other side and maybe gotten repel. And that's probably what some of these people who do pithball type videos on YouTube would say is happening. You move to another side and there's repel. But I'm showing here that the same side attracts and then repels. You don't have to change sides. And so that throws a huge monkey wrench into the standard model for explaining what's going on with this. Okay, well, it's going to repel because that's got a buildup in it already. Look, it's repelling at several inches away already. Okay. It's off the camera. Move the camera a little bit. It's not in the shot. Let's see. There it is. Oh, I just discharged it with my finger. Still repelling though on that side. You can't get the bottom to attract. You can't get the top to attract. Nothing will attract. See? This is just disproving negative charge exists. Okay, once this dissipates, it should come over and attract again. All right, it's when I point at it, it's attracted to my body. Well, this wood's in the shot. There it is. It's down. Oh boy. Get this ohm meter. It's black. Cover that up. Oh boy, it's got too much white. There we go. Turn it. Okay, now you can see the bead. It's, some 2 inches away from the wand. I'll move it a little bit closer. Okay. That's still repelling. It's dissipating the loading it had. Now it's going to attract again. See, and it attached. It attracted. Now it repelled again. There you go. See, it loaded back up. It got down to the point where it would attract, and then it loaded back up with electric photons, and then there was too much repel again. And there's your explanation. Now I've got to work on the explanation for why these wood objects and plastic and rubber objects are always attracted, but they never repel like the conductors do. So I'll be working on that. There it went. What you were seeing at the end of the video number 30 here in that short clip was that was before I had changed the white wand, the end of it, from white to black, so the aluminum bead would show up, the styrofoam bead covered by aluminum. But anyway, the bead was pulled straight down and attached to the wand. Had the wand not been there, it would have hung in the same place, but it was touching, it was attached. When it jumped to what would have been my right, it was moving away by repel. If you look at it again, you'll notice that the thread is tilted, it's slanted in that direction. It didn't fall away because it no longer was attracted. It actually repelled and was staying away by repel.